Welcome, I'm Sten Sorensen, the CEO of Cereno Scientific. And Cereno is involved together with Abbott in a collaborative study in PAH, the orphan disease, and to study our lead drug CS1 in safety, tolerance and efficacy. So with me here today I have Phil Adamson, cardiologist and Chief Medical Officer of the Heart Failure Division at Abbott. Welcome.
Thank you, Sten. Thanks for having me.
And I have our CMO, Björn Dahlev, the CMO for Cereno Scientific. So could you tell me something about the clinical trial design?
This trial is very innovative, quite frankly. It's one of the first in the world to evaluate the effectiveness of a vasoactive compound and a compound that fundamentally addresses the mechanism of disease for pulmonary arterial hypertension while monitoring the pressures and outputs of the heart on a regular basis. So the disease, pulmonary arterial hypertension, essentially causes a restriction of blood flow out of the pump called the right ventricle into the lungs. That causes that ventricle to get large and fail. Patients die at that point. We've never been able to regularly monitor the pressures that the pump has to pump against and see how the medications that we apply actually affect the disease. So this is a remarkable opportunity to not only understand how CS1 works, but it's an opportunity to actually understand better how pulmonary arterial hypertension works.
Thank you, Phil. And I remember when we approached Abbott to search for a positive answer on our collaboration, and we were so happy that you wanted to join us in this effort, both for Abbott, of course, but also for what we're trying to do with the study for the patients with CS1.
This is very important for the CardioMEMS franchise at Abbott because in terms of drug development, being able, again, to see the real-time effects of a drug that's novel, understand its effects over time is very important, but to demonstrate how useful pulmonary artery pressure monitoring is also very important for us. So this is a great collaborative effort, one of the first we've done, and I look forward to more. This is really a very important process for Abbott.
Yeah, thank you. And Björn, we are all part of this effort, and you are the scientific lead at Cereno and the CMO. How do you view the trial?
I mean, I'm, as Phil, very excited about having the opportunity to use CardioMEMS, and I think that makes it innovative. But it's also a trial, it's a phase 2 trial. It's a trial where we also look at other things. As said, it's safety, tolerability is the primary, but we have a whole host of secondary variables. Actually, all that have been used in other trials, like 6 minutes walk test, like echocardiography, MRI, biomarkers, questionnaires about quality of life, about how you function in different aspects. So we will have a huge amount of data to evaluate the effect of, in addition to the innovative CardioMEMS equipment. And also can also say that this is a randomized trial with 3 doses. So we will have both a look at the dose dependency of the effect and also try to find a dose that is the best for future trials. So I think that the trial will answer many questions and will be one of the most important trial actually in the area because we will have so much information.
Thank you. So, and back to Phil then, the measurement with CardioMEMS, how does that work? And, it's an advanced technology, isn't it?
It is advanced technology. I've worked with it for nearly 20 years now, which surprises me. I'm still very excited about the technology. It's still amazing to me. It works based on a micro-electromechanical systems technology. So that allows an implanted sensor inside the body to be empowered by external interrogation. With that, you have no need for a lead or a battery, which are the things that typically medical devices have a problem with. So the device is implanted. It's very safe to implant. Patients tolerate it quite well, and the device works for the life of the patient. It's amazing. So the device can measure pulmonary artery pressure, so that's systolic, diastolic, and mean, as well as heart rate. And we are developing, as you know, an algorithm to estimate stroke volume from the right ventricle, and then all of the calculations one has and can do from stroke volume and pulmonary pressures and heart rate. It's a complete hemodynamic package at any time you want. And before now, we'd have to do a Swan-Ganz catheter, open the artery in the neck, and put a tube inside the lung circulation to measure these pressures. That only is done either in the intensive care unit or in a cath lab. Now we have all that information anytime we want.
We believe it's fantastic, and we were happy to have this technology in our study. What does it mean for the power of the study, or what you can measure? What does it actually mean then, that you can measure these things?
So
and having a novel drug.
Right, and as we know, pulmonary arterial hypertension essentially describes a disease in which the blood pressures in the lung circulation go up. So it's similar in concept to when the blood pressure in the body or the systemic circulation goes up. When that happens, we treat it by measuring blood pressure in our arm with a sphygmomanometer. Well, we've never really been able to regularly measure these pressures in people in the lung circulation. It's very important circulation. In this disease, those pressures, the pressures define the disease, but it's a combination not only of the pressures, but as we've mentioned, the output of the heart. So the CardioMEMS system actually can measure the pressures, see how the pressures come down with the effects of the drug, as well as measuring the output from the heart and see how the output improves. So those two combinations of physiologic effects with the drug are fundamental to the treatment of the disease. With CardioMEMS now, we're able to measure those, again, from the patient's home every day, as often as we wish.
Thank you. So Björn, looking at CS1 then, what is it and how will we measure it in this study? There is some characteristics around our drug that we feel are excited, right?
Yeah, CS1 is a HDAC inhibitor. It has a huge impact. It has been documented in various animal studies to have anti-fibrotic, anti-inflammatory, reverse vascular remodeling, anti-thrombotic, and pressure-reducing effects. So having these 5 characteristics, it kind of fits like hand in a glove for PAH, because all of these characteristics are part of the pathogenesis of the disease. So we think that with this kind of approach, with this kind of treatment, we can have a disease-modifying effect on the disease. That means that we can change the progression, hopefully make patients feel better and live longer.
And in the study, there's a number of other parameters than what Phil here has mentioned. And for instance, validated risk score tools to measure various markers and functions for both quality of life, function, and prognostic for these patients. Can you mention some other things that we are measuring here to document around the drugs?
I can pick up on the risk score, because I think that the risk score is a novel thing. It takes into account around 10 different aspects of the disease, all the way from resistance in a catheterization situation to quality of life, to biomarkers like BNP, physical signs of the patient's functional level of patient's, so to say, ability to move around, and it takes into account several things. And this is we are using what's called a REVEAL risk score. It comes from a registry in the US where patients with pulmonary hypertension have been documented their prognosis and characteristics for many years. And it has been validated versus different studies, but never used in a prospective manner like we do in our study. It has been that you retrospectively apply it to different studies, and you can look at that if you change 1 point of this risk score, that is the similar thing as 20% reduction of mortality in a year. So this is also novel in the design. And we hope maybe it could be part of the future endpoint of studies. I mean, traditionally, studies of pulmonary arterial hypertension have been very limited in their scope when they have looked at 6 minutes walk test as a primary endpoint, for example, meaning that it's a functional parameter, but it has not really any relation to outcome of the disease. So we think that maybe we can change. Maybe CardioMEMS also will be part of a future endpoint or objective of pulmonary hypertension studies.
So the clinical trial design, as you describe it, is very modern, very forefront in PH with this technology and with the measurements of validated risk score, etc. And it's so interesting that it's now accepted at CHEST, clinical trial design presentation by Dr. Raymond Benza, who is the principal investigator of this effort that we're pursuing in PH. So where is the study done and how many patients, etc.? Could you maybe address that?
I mean,
and maybe also follow on?
The study is done in the US, entirely US academic centers. And we have chosen centers for obvious reasons, those that have experience with the CardioMEMS, because implanting that needs some training and experience to do it in a correct way. So we have chosen centers that have that experience, but also are expert centers in PAH. So we have accumulated the interest from around 10 centers in the US, both on the west and the east coast, and some in the middle as well. So we have a good spread, and these centers are in the process of being activated now. We have one patient randomized so far, but several patients in the screening process.
I think these centers are very, I think it's important to mention these centers are expert centers in the treatment of pulmonary arterial hypertension. Mm-hmm. The nature of that disease, as you mentioned, it's an orphan disease, but the clinical management of patients with pulmonary arterial hypertension is not easy. There are multiple drugs that need to be applied. The drugs are applied, and then effect is evaluated, and patients have to tolerate that. Patients have to tolerate many drugs. They're very expensive, and those drugs can interact with other medications. So being able now to tailor or to personalize medical therapy for this disease, I think, is revolutionary. We now can understand when a drug works, how much the patient should be taking, and fundamentally understand the lesion of this disease. This trial is literally going to revolutionize, in my opinion, how pulmonary arterial hypertension is looked at, but also how it's treated.
And I'm coming back to the disease modification, potentially prevention of remodeling of vessels and heart, maybe mostly right heart, but then also the potential of maybe even reversing structure remodeling that have taken place. Your views on that, Björn, and maybe to follow on, Phil?
I mean, traditionally, the treatments for pulmonary arterial hypertension have been vasodilators. That has been developed several aspects. We have 3 or 4 different classes of vasodilators, which has not really any impact on the disease progression or the disease itself. What the community now is talking about is that is it possible to reverse the vascular proliferation, reverse the remodeling of the vasculature in the lungs in a way that you reduce the thickness of the wall, you reduce the resistance, you have eased the work of the right heart to really make a change in the disease. That's what's called disease modification. No one has really shown it in the clinical trial yet, but I think we are in the beginning of that development with this study, with this approach of treatment, and you call it reverse remodeling, that process that will be in the core change to have that disease modification.
Yeah, you know, the mechanism, I think, is very important for this disease, but it applies to other diseases as well. When the blood vessels become smaller and the tube gets smaller, then it's harder to get blood through there. The pump, the right ventricle is designed as a low pressure, high capacitance pump. So normally the lung circulation is really pretty fascinating because it almost is very simple to get blood to the lung, and it goes out over multiple different branches, hundreds and thousands of branches, and that resistance is very low typically. In this disease, unique to this disease, is what you've described. This remodeling causes the blood vessels to shrink, essentially. And now this pump that's designed to pump against a low pressure system now has to pump against a very high pressure system, high resistance system. And that resistance, honestly, is what stresses the right ventricle. When right ventricular function starts to decline in a patient with pulmonary arterial hypertension, or with anyone, the mortality goes up almost exponentially.
Yeah.
And so we're preventing that by not only having insight into the way the right ventricle is working, but also fundamentally altering the mechanism of disease.
So back to Björn here, and maybe you also have some experience here, Phil, but the thrombotic aspects in this disease, what's going on?
I mean, in all these vessels where you have the thickening of the wall, you have the increase in resistance, you have depletion of fibrinolytic capacity in the vessel wall, meaning that the risk of thrombosis in these small vessels increases. And that is also seen as part of the development of the disease, that you get microthrombosis in the vessels, meaning that you yet further increases the resistance for the blood. So that's part of the negative kind of spiral into more and more increase in pressure, resistance, and load on the right heart. So previously, there have been some attempts to treat pulmonary arterial hypertension with antithrombotic therapy. Actually, 6-7 different smaller studies have observed indications of benefit of just giving antithrombotic therapy. And there have been a meta-analysis of these studies which actually came out significant for improving mortality. But no one has really done the definitive study with antithrombotic therapy. So it has kind of been forgotten maybe or not included in the guidelines except for special patients. So I think with the properties of HDAC inhibition and in general and CS1 in particular, having antithrombotic properties adds to therapy, and that is no other therapy in pipeline, not established and not in the pipeline of future PH therapies that has that capacity. So I think that makes this approach unique as well.
And we're talking, I have a couple of questions more for you if we have time. So One aspect in therapy, I've spent a big part of my life in heart failure and survival trials and so on, and seen over decades that it's gone from maybe double therapy, some diuretics and other agents, and then gone on to quadruple therapy or even more, and almost polypharmacy. So PH seems to be behind here, and we're using maybe a couple of agents and then moving on in the decision tree. Do you have any thoughts around that, Phil? What's going to happen?
Oh, I think there's a growing recognition that pulmonary hypertension in general is almost in an epidemic proportion in this world. There are 5 types of pulmonary hypertension that are classified based on why the blood pressures go up in the lung. World Health Organization Group 1 is where we're working with this study. The largest group are people who have congestive heart failure, either from preserved ejection fraction heart failure or reduced. It's about 24 million people in the world with that disease. We've recently discovered almost everyone with that disease has pulmonary hypertension. It's amazing. So I believe that we will see in the future pharmacologic agents targeting the vasculature of the lungs, which has always been forgotten as a part of the pathophysiology of heart failure and of other diseases. And that has led to the complications, the dread complications that are associated with right ventricular failure and advanced disease. I believe that we'll see numerous vasoactive compounds come down the pike targeting those vessels in heart failure. I think our study will illuminate the way a multimodal drug addressing several aspects of the underlying pathophysiology dramatically changes how we approach the disease in general. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg, I suspect, in breakthroughs that are going to really make patients live longer. But you mentioned mortality trials, and measuring mortality is important, obviously. Improving and making people live longer is important. But frankly, if you do that at the expense of their quality of life, what are we doing? And so we have to understand that improving quality of life is equally important to a person who has a disease as is to extend their life. And that's why I'm impressed with this trial, because already in a phase 2 trial, we're evaluating how does this affect your ability to do things, how does this affect your quality of life, as well as fundamentally measuring the mechanism of the disease.
But if you look at the heart failure development, you mentioned that and how it's treated. I mean, traditionally, only mortality. Now, quality of life has risen to even be one of the most important aspects of heart failure treatment as well. I mean, it's not that you have to only reduce mortality, you have to improve on life, quality of life. So, no, but I wanted to also address the question you had about combination therapy in PH, because I think that that's a very important aspect, because traditionally it has been 2 drugs basically as the standard of care, and then if you don't reduce your risk enough, you can have a 3rd drug, and ultimately the really sick patients have maybe yet another drug, so it can be 4, but at a very late stage of the disease. I think that in the future we will have multiple approaches, and it could be even that standard of care is 3 or 4 drugs with complementary effects. But at the same time, as Phil said, we can also have more drugs with multiple effects, like the CS1 we are discussing, addressing several of the aspects, both the reduction of pressure through vasodilation, but also go into the heart of the matter, that is the vascular disease in itself. So I think that there is a huge opportunity for a very interesting development in the field in the future.
So, my last question, maybe. When I listen to you, I think about management of patients, and we've all been part of, the development of precision medicine, or, combination of diagnostic and therapeutics and management of patients in hospitals or out. But and this trial is in a way visualizing that you have a technology that can measure, and it's in the patients, implantable. You see what's happening, and you can tailor, as you mentioned here, Phil. You could in the future here tailor drug and add or take away drug to optimize the management of the patient. So it looks like the future will be a combined management of where you utilize tools like this, and you also utilize drugs in these patients in a combination, in a way. Do you have any thoughts around that?
I think this is the future.
Yeah.
Digital medicine has to have an ability to monitor patients outside the typical or traditional confines of a clinical encounter. I think we in medicine have almost arrogantly thought that the 15 minutes that we spend with a patient somehow affects the next 8 weeks or 6 months in between now and the next visit. So much happens when they walk out the door, and we have no idea how that happens. So being able to sophisticatedly and safely monitor patients and essentially the lesion, like I said, of their disease from their home, without having them to travel, without having to require them to come into the hospital and have an expensive, invasive procedure. This is where we're going. And I think we'll see multiple sensors come down the pike that will combine data that will bring information both to the patient as well as to the provider. Because ultimately, I think all of this digital medicine innovation will be able to be combined to allow the patient to be in control of their lives, which I think will be the most important thing we can do, is to recruit the patient, empower them, they're motivated to get better, and providing them these tools is going to be fascinating to see.
I really want to echo that, but also emphasize that when you have this remote monitoring of the patient, and they don't have to go to the hospital, and you have reliable data that you can give patient direction about increase your medication or take that away or whatever. It's not only that you can do it remotely, but you also teach the patient much more about their own disease, because they can take part of what you measure. You can also have an environment which is more natural for the patient, and that is much more, tells you much more about the disease and its progression than you come to a clinic, you rush in there and you measure something which is not relevant for what happens at home. So I think that there are many more aspects to this that are really, really important. And I can take the example, heart failure, again, you are both interested in heart failure, so I can take the example, we have moved the treatment of heart failure to be outpatient. That has been a movement for many years. And then it have moved into the homes of the patients, but with very primitive measures, like weighing themselves every day to report if they gain a kilo, or to kind of monitor if you have fluid retention or fluid accumulation in the body. But things happen much before that. And with this kind of technology, like a CardioMEMS, you can discover that long before you have your fluid accumulation or fluid retention, meaning that you can also, but prevention is much easier than treatment, and that means that you can direct your treatment in a much more sophisticated way.
Absolutely.
And I think this also reflects on pulmonary hypertension and pre-pressures, I think. So you could detect it earlier and maybe intervention then with therapy.
I took this as an example, because we will know much more about pulmonary hypertension when we have done this study, or future studies with this technology. So then the directions will come for how to do it in pulmonary hypertension.
So by that note, I thank you both. It's been very interesting to hear, and we're all excited about the collaboration and the study, and looking forward to see what we can do for these patients. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
For more episodes of our Insight series, please follow Cereno Scientific on LinkedIn or our YouTube channel.